Okay, here's my Keurig teardown and water leak repair and cleaning video. And if you've read my blog, you know I despise these Keurig machines. Not only are they just unnecessary complication of what really is a very simple machine, they're very expensive, and they also use sort of a subscription model for coffee. You have to buy these little cartridges, which of course are always going to be super fresh because they've been sitting on the shelf for months or years or God knows what, as opposed to freshly grinding your coffee. Before I get into the Keurig, this is my current coffee machine, which I found on the street in Charleston, South Carolina. Somebody was throwing it away, and that was a decade ago, so the total cost was free. And it's missing a few parts. The lid on the carafe is broken. I just took the little valve that was on there that allowed you to take the carafe out, and it's been making coffee now for a decade. And it makes pretty darn good coffee. You just have to buy the cheap little filters. You buy the coffee you want. It's a lot cheaper in bean form, or you can even buy it pre-ground. We grind it and put it in there. Cost is about 22 cents a cup or less, probably closer to 15 cents if you buy in bulk. Whereas these Keurig cartridges can cost up to $1 a piece, although if you buy them in bulk, I guess they get down to about 50 cents. A lot of people say, well, you know, these are more convenient. You put the cartridge in, there's no mess, there's no fuss. And they sort of have a point. Cleaning out the filter on these things can be disgusting. You have to dump this out into a garbage can. And you have to clean these things occasionally. This one is kind of dirty right now. It's ready for its annual washing. But the idea that the Keurig doesn't need cleaning is really kind of specious, because as you can see, there's a number of parts on this thing that actually do have to be cleaned periodically. There's this cartridge holder, and that has a needle in it that has to be cleaned, and you can use a toothpick or a paper clip. Now there's lots of videos on YouTube that show you how to do that. There's also this little guy down here, and that the coffee or tea goes through that, and that gets pretty disgusting too. And if you don't clean that regularly, well, you know, that's just foul. The other thing too is this whole thing stays damp, and here in Georgia we get mold and mildew, so I would suggest cleaning this. One of the biggest problems with this thing is there's this little hole in the back here, and I can't figure out. This closes, and then you go in there and there's dust and dirt, and I tried wiping it. This Keurig was down in the pottery shop. It was covered with clay. It's had a hard life, to be fair to the Keurig people, but it's hard to clean. I've cleaned it as best I can. The big problem we had with this was it was leaking water all over the place. And now you can see I have a paper towel under here. I'm checking for leaks. And I dicked around with this for a while, and I cleaned the whole thing, and I used some lime away on everything. I use these little dots. These are little feet that stick. We use them to stick underneath pots and things, keep them from scratching your tables. I put them underneath each of the feet on the Keurig to raise it up. The problem is this is a triumph of design over practicality. The water tank comes off, and to make it all nice and slick looking, it matches the height of the cabinet. And the problem is that I don't know if this sagged over time, whatever. The water tank was hitting the table, and then the water seal in here wasn't sealing. Now, I've had some coffee makers, conventional coffee makers in the past that had this kind of thing. And I just think this is just poor engineering, because you have a one-way valve in here, and you have a one-way valve in there, and there's a little neoprene seal. And when it's all brand new and working perfectly, you can put this in there and it won't leak. You can see a little air bubble coming out. But you're relying on a seal to keep this thing going. Now, this thing here, you pour the water into it. It doesn't have the removable tank, which is a convenience, no doubt. But there's no seal to go bad. That's why this thing has been in business for probably 2 decades. Without a hiccup, even with parts missing. So anyway, we put the feet underneath there. I don't know if you can see them. There's one of them. Probably doesn't come up on this camera. And that raised it up, so now there's a little gap there, and the tank can now seat down in the seal, and it stopped leaking. When we got this thing, you push the button, nothing happened. Now let's try it now. It may or may not work. It seems to be working intermittently. I'm just going to run some water through it. Now you can see the pump running in there. There's a little heater, there's a motor, there's a pump. There's even what appears to be an RJ11 telephone jack on the bottom of this thing. And I'll have to research that more. I guess you could plug this into a network or to your telephone so you can call up your Keurig and have it make coffee for you. I'm not sure why it has a data port. Accessing the inside of this thing is kind of a pain in the butt because you really can't take the bottom off because everything's bolted to the bottom. You can sort of take this little side panel off and then take this front panel off, but there really isn't much so you can service in there. The only reason I took this off was to see whether the leak was internal or not. But again, cleaning, there's also this drip tray. This gets really disgusting because when you lift this thing up and take your cartridge out, it leaks coffee and that goes into the drip tray. And of course you want to clean all this out. And of course we have very hard water here, so what happens is all this stuff was covered with lime. And I believe that's one of the problems with these needles clogging too. The other thing is why is the coffee going up into the needles and clogging it? It shouldn't be doing that, but as many people have noted on YouTube, they tend to do that, and that's why you have to clean it out with a toothpick. I think it's from people trying to reuse the cartridges, or maybe certain brands of cartridges. We just ran a Starbuck through it, and that seemed to clog it a bit. And I tried to run the Starbuck through twice, and I think that drove the coffee up into the thing, and I had to clean it all out again. So I'm not sure if it's completely fixed. It seems to be working. We'll put it back in service and see if it stops leaking and see if it keeps making coffee. But it could just be that it's reaching the end of its design life and have to go out and buy another $199 coffee maker. And meanwhile, the good old reliable Braun will probably be good for another decade or so. So that's my 2 cents on Keurigs. It's sort of a trendy, fun thing to have, but and it is convenient for making a single cup of coffee in commercial settings. But personally, I'm sticking with old reliable. Thanks for watching.